It is my great pleasure tonight to introduce Hal Rubenstein, who will be presenting his book, The Looks of Love, 50 Moments in Fashion That Inspired Romance. Without further ado, will you please join me in welcoming Hal?
The cool thing about 100 Unforgettable Dresses is that we use the dresses sort of as a jumping off point to sort of talk about culture and where we were at that time in terms of design and how we looked at celebrity and how we looked at fashion. It was fun, but in some ways for me it wasn't big enough. Love's the most important thing in the world to me, hopefully to you too. I started thinking about all the things, these sort of moments in time and movies and television shows and concerts that I'd been to and places and social events and fashion. Don! And fashion, great guy over there, wonderful stuff. And I realized all these things that are ruminating in my head, and all of these things had sort of influenced how I look at love, how I look at romance, how I think we all look at love and romance, how it affects the way we look, how we interact with each other, how it changes the way we dress, how we guard at social concerns, and consequently, we came up with this idea of the looks of love, 50 moments in fashion that inspired romance. So there's just a short group of what's in here. Some of my favorites are in here, some of my favorites are not. Some will take a little bit longer to explain, some don't. One of the ones that's probably is not in here is, I'll start with this, and this is the embodiment of everything. I watch Singing in the Rain once every 8 weeks. Because why? Because to me, we all want to fall in love the way we do in the movies. What could be better? Think about it, the times when you'll having an argument with somebody and you stand back and you start to yell and scream and all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I sound like that scene in that film, like War of the Roses, oh my God, what's wrong with us? Or just the reverse. And think about it. I mean, it just was raining a little bit before and I was thinking about it. There's not a single person here who has ever walked through the rain at one time when they were in a great mood and opened their umbrella and suddenly just started going, do, 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 do. That's the power of our culture to affect and infect what we do. So let's start with a couple. Where do we begin? Love Story. This is a really shitty movie. Okay? It's terrible. It's hokey. The plot's awful. I swear that when Eric Siegel pitched the damn thing, he must have written it for Paramount Pictures on flashcards. Oh, the prep, here comes the waspy boy. The waspy boy with a shitty father, and they have a lot of money. And here comes the Cliffy girl with the smart-ass mouth, and the Italian father who's the salt of the earth, and he brings her up, and she brings her down. They fall in love, she coughs, she dies. Right? Okay. What is it about this film that just got us? Kurt Vonnegut said that watching this movie was like eating a chocolate eclair. Okay? There are 4 reasons why this movie worked. 1, Barbara Walters. Eric Siegel appeared on the Today Show on Valentine's Day. And Barbara started the interview by saying, I was up all last night reading a book, and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I'm not kidding you. By the end of that day, there was not, remember, this is when we didn't have Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. There wasn't a book, there wasn't a copy of Love Story left anywhere in the country. Everybody else was doing second best with flowers and chocolates. Okay, that's 1. 2, the score. That Francis Lay score, it starts out with that little plinky, plinky, plink, and then goes to that full. By the time that thing hits full orchestra, you are grabbing for tissues and nothing has ever happened. It got to the point where you would just hear that music come in through the radio and you would have to pull over to the side of the road. Okay? The third reason, and the main reason, look at them. They are the essence of preppy gorgeousness. They are everything that the American dream is about. Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, J. Crew, they all owe their life to these 2 people. Okay? They are Ryan O'Neal, if you remember, fresh from Peyton Place, where he was the good bad boy on Peyton Place with all the curly hair and Grace Metalius' novel. Okay? She was a cover girl. She'd been discovered. She actually, by the way, she was married to Robert Evans at the time, she was friends with Eric Siegel, who ran Paramount Pictures, and she wanted the book Buy It For Me, okay? The two of them, what they did, remember, this is 1970, right around the time of the last, this is when hippiness is still coming in. It's right around the time of starting of minimalism. It's also the tail end of the Beatles and London Swings. And in comes all the things that were suddenly out, that had been out and not cool, like Shetland sweaters and cable knit sweaters and Harris tweeds. Oh, I thought it was two pictures. And Harris tweeds and peacoats. And suddenly everything from circle skirts to skirts with pins to turtleneck sweaters, yes, and peacoats became really cool again. And then on poor Ally McGraw's deathbed, and if you remember, on her deathbed, Ally McGraw looked better in her deathbed than most of us look on our good days, okay? She was kind enough to say, what the movie really said, which I think why it had so much intensity for us, and if you remember, Ryan then sits there at the Wellman rink before Trump had bought it, he actually fixed it up, okay, and then one thing he did nice, but the realization that if somebody loved you, they would be in your heart and they would be in your life forever. The idea of never having to say you're sorry, not so much. Okay. Obsession. Most perfume ads prior to Obsession were all about some girl running through a field of flowers. There was a wild horse. There'd be people caught in the rain under the umbrella. Calvin's quote was, in the 1990s, everyone I know talked about sex. That's all we thought about. We wanted to have sex all the time. The thought of it, the need of it, the wanted it, we just wanted to have sex. Calvin was right. We're about, I'm a little bit younger, not much. Sex was it. Remember, we're talking 1983 here. This is horny time. And it wasn't just horny time for gay people. We're just more open about it. Straight people, you're all liars when you think you weren't doing it because you were there. Now, as a designer, Calvin was a strict minimalist, almost very cerebral, which is probably why Raf Simons is going to take over his collection. Okay, but when it came to marketing, this man was brilliant because he thought with his groin. Okay, remember Brooke Shields at 15? What comes between me and my Calvins? Nothing. Okay? He introduced Calvin Klein underwear. Younger people think it was Marky Mark. Well, no, there's something that preceded that. It was a pole vault, Olympic pole vaulter named Tom Hittness. That if you remember the photo, when I talk about it, because it was regarded as the 10 photos that changed America, okay, by a photography magazine. Bruce Weber shot Tom Hittness in just a pair of briefs, the perfect little outline of a scrotum, against a white wall in Santorini with a brilliant blue sky, and they placed it over Times Square, and against bus shelters. They were gone from every single bus shelter in New York in 3 days, and they had to take the poster down in Times Square because there were so many automobile accidents that they actually petitioned the city to get rid of it. Okay, when it came to perfume, very simply, Calvin wanted the scent of someone driven mad by desire. Okay? So, all of a sudden, what you basically saw in these ads were blue-washed and sepia-toned limbs. How many limbs? It was hard to count. Okay? Why? Because as Calvin said, these were my fantasies, some of them realized. He was fascinated by a very androgynous-looking actress, a model named Josie Barain. And if you remember the TV ads, they were great. There'd be some young man sort of like running after Josie Barain, and he would start quoting ridiculous things like F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway, truly a ridiculous writer. And then afterwards, he would just go, the smell of it. And what he was talking about was smelling sex. Did this work? Remember, this is 1983. The sales of Obsession, which, by the way, is still one of their biggest sellers, in the first year was $50 million. Woodstock, stuck in the garden. The first thing I ever hear was, you went to Woodstock? Yeah, I did. It is, okay, here it is. Woodstock is regarded as the most important pop cultural event of the 20th century. It is also considered the birthplace of Make Love Not War, the age of Aquarius, boho, long hair, embroidered jeans, large mega concerts, live rock albums, rock films, launched rallies of every kind, and the best thing, and the best thing that ever happened in music. The event started with Richie Havens. It made stars of Joe Cocker, Santana, Crosby, Stills and Nash added Young there. It peaked with Jefferson Airplane, The Sly and the Family Stone. It ended with Jimi Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner with his teeth. It was incredible. It was unbelievable, except we came home from Woodstock and there was a little bit of a myth going on, and the myth and the reality are not the same. Joni Mitchell quoted when that famous song Woodstock, which by the way, she wasn't there, but we've got to get back to the garden. The reality was for the 450,000 people who were there is we just have to get the hell home. You couldn't leave. There was no way out. You couldn't walk home. My car was parked 5 miles away and buried in a hunk of mud. Now, here's the reality of who actually went to Woodstock. And just look at me and it'll give you a clue, okay? Woodstock, for these 3 days of peace and love, the tickets were $24, which doesn't sound like a lot now. But when you realize that the Beatles played Shea Stadium for $4.50, that'll give you an idea of what 24 bucks was worth. Also, there was no StubHub, there was no Live Nation. So where were all these tickets sold? They were sold at record stores in New York and New York only. Only a minimum amount were basically sold by mail order because there was no online. So who bought this stuff? White Jewish class middle kids like me. Okay, so we all went up, like most white little Jewish kids going to the Catskills for the weekend. We went with a suitcase full of clothes because we were going to change outfits. We had something for Friday, we had something for Saturday. Oh, we can wear this when Sly comes on. I'm not joking, okay? But those 3 days of peace, love, and music turned into 3 thunderstorms, 500 bad acid trips, 3,000 medical emergencies, 8 miscarriages, epic lines for the bathroom. There were only 6 telephones. Good Jewish boy, I called my mom and dad. Okay, but no violence. No violence and extraordinary music. And that's how the myth started. Woodstock Nation, suddenly we came home and realized that we were told we were at a temporary utopia, and suddenly it started to grow. All of a sudden, we all came, we had the natural look. We had the natural look because it started pouring in buckets when Joan Baez was singing, so basically all those Jewish kids came out with curly hair like Joyce Carol Oates, and that was it, okay? We came home so caked in mud, we looked like we were something out of National Geographic Aborigines. But everywhere you looked, and everywhere you went was the same thing, so why bother to move? It was extraordinary. Because yes, we shared everything. You shared food, you shared drugs, you shared grass. I mean, the estimation was that 9 out of 10 people who were there were on some kind of stuff, and that's really a low estimate. It really is. But to this day, even in this fall's collections, it created a look, a manner, a style that we all seem to want to go back, which is why every time somebody comes out with boho clothes, they succeed all over again. Love and Death, Bonnie and Clyde. Perhaps the most violent gangster film ever made up until that time. Except that's not how this movie starts. It doesn't start with Edward G. Robinson. It doesn't start with people blowing their heads up. It starts with a photo of that incredibly beautiful woman, her lips, her cherry lips, and a guy honking downstairs who's about to steal his mother's car. They don't make men more beautiful than Warren Beatty. He's almost more beautiful than she is, okay? He starts honking the horn. She puts on a silk slip dress. They run down. The Flatten Scruggs has this little banjo playing in the back, and they are off on this fun little journey to basically have a cute little gangster. I mean, the whole thing starts like this kind of weird romantic, like hillbilly sex comedy. No, it really does. Gangster movies didn't start this way. And the whole thing's a lark until one of their bank robberies, because they're really very stupid and they don't know how to do this, it goes wrong. And they go to run away, and the car wasn't there, and they try, and the bank teller jumps onto the railing of the car, and she's screaming, and Clyde Barrow, in his panic, takes the gun and shoots the teller in the face. And all of a sudden, director Arthur Penn has blood splattered all over the car. We're now kind of numb to this because you're now all addicted to The Walking Dead, so what could be more gross? But the thing is, this is back in 1968. There's blood all over the car. His lenses are broken and cutting into his skin. There's shattered windows. And what started out as a funny movie gets darker and darker and more terrifying. Bosley Crowther, the critic for Time, the New York Times Magazine, went insane. He hated the film. Time Magazine hated the film. Warner Brothers didn't know what to do with the movie. They dumped it and they trashed it out. 3 things saved this film. 4, actually. Pauline Kael, which at that time was just developing a cult for the New Yorker magazine, wrote a 7,000-word review, basically saying, "You're all idiots, this is a masterpiece." So strong was it that Time magazine reversed their opinion and basically did a cover story on it. And the third thing was, this was about beautiful young people in 1968. 1968, there'll be 2 films I'm showing you about rebellion. 1968, I was 18 in 1968. Now you know how old I am. Okay, 1968, this was the year where basically everybody rebelled. Everybody rebelled, the establishment sucked. Here were 2 people fighting the establishment in the Depression. They became culture heroes. The irony of them becoming culture heroes is they don't dress like people again going against the establishment. They don't look like they're not dressed like hippies. They're not dressed like boho. Why? Because Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker, Theodora Van Runkle, who was the costume designer, discovered was that when they would rob banks and get successful, they would go to Marshall Field and basically buy dress-up clothes. And so what they did is all of a sudden, this was around the same time Seventh Avenue was trying to sell miniskirts and couldn't get them on anybody. Okay? And the 2 of them started this. One's very smart, if you notice. They don't have period hair and makeup because both of them refused. But the combination of the period clothes, the hair and makeup, just the place went bananas. The berets alone, there's a factory in France, in Ney, France, that makes the berets. They're the #1. They usually make 5,000 a month. They started making 12,000 a month for 2 years. This entire film just basically, it wound up creating her makeup, her hair, her shoes, the 3-piece suits, the tweed, all of it, wound up redefining it, and basically the film wound up, of course, to be one of the great classics of American cinema. Stairway to Heaven. This is John Galliano's, you got it? This is John Galliano's fashion show at the Palais Garnier. It is probably the most spectacular fashion show I've ever seen in my career. As Tim Blanks, who is a wonderful critic who now writes for the Business of Fashion, if you comes online every day, if any of you don't read it, it really is amazing. It really is one of the best things to read every day now about fashion. He wrote it was every drug experience everyone ever had concentrated into 10 minutes. Galliano is to me a once-in-a-generation talent. I think he's the most talented man working today. He was 5 years at Dior, but he had yet to be accepted. He was still too young, he was still too sharp, he was still too scary. But this was 10 minutes of haute couture at its most joyous. What he did was, he was inspired, let me see, I think I have one more picture. He was inspired by an Italian heiress named Luisa Casati, whose whole life's goal was to become a work of art. She had 130 portraits painted of herself. She would throw balls that had the waiters were painted gold. She would walk around wearing either live snakes or an ermine robe with nothing underneath it. She would be walking a cheetah. Actually, Cartier's cheetah was taken from her. Okay, it shows you the influence. Nijinsky performed, Isadora Duncan performed, Chanel was there, Colette was there. Everybody came to this thing. And the inspiration that Galliano said was, I had been invited on this magical trip called haute couture. And I wanted to push the limits of what was possible to make make-believe real. And so down this, for any of you ever seen the Palais Garnier in Paris, it is this it's this wedding cake of an opera house. It's actually kind of ludicrous and magnificent at the same time. But there's so much going on. It's like sensory overload. He dressed it up even more. And down these grand staircases came 75 dresses. Not one of them looked like anything else to the one before. It was as if somebody had taken the inspiration for 75 collections and said, you're only getting one shots. They basically almost had nothing to do with real fashion, in the sense that anything like you would wear to a bar mitzvah. That wasn't happening. But what he did was he took a moribund area of fashion, which was haute couture, and he revived it. He revived Dior. All of these are caught on the bias. But the thing, he reestablished haute couture as a place to dream. And by making it so fantastic, he reminded people that what haute couture was about was not merchandise, but it was about the limitless of design. And that by exercising the imagination, he actually made couture relevant again. You know who they are? It's Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love. Okay. Marc Jacobs is credited with creating grunge. But Marc just put it on a runway. Okay? And he got amazing press, and he also got fired, if you remember, from Perry Ellis. Why? Because grunge was the exact reverse of how fashion works. You go back to what Galliano did, where fashion starts with this great idea, and then it eventually trickles down, and then somewhere along the way, it gets to Target, or Zara, or whatever you buy it. Grunge, however, what Marc was doing, Marc was going to St. Mark's Place and buying plaid shirts and then having fabric made in Lake Como, silk shirts and cashmere hats made out of the same caps that basically punk bands like Sonic Youth and Pearl Jam, that they were all buying at Kmart and Walmart in Seattle. So the point is that everybody, from the very beginning, everybody could do grunge for next to nothing. So nobody needed grunge to be expensive. One of the reasons why grunge became so popular and has remained so is because it doesn't require any money to do so. And if Seattle was punk's sort of Oz, and the king and queen of Oz, or the emperor and emperor, were Kurt and Courtney. Courtney was obsessed by him because he was so damn pretty. So she said she saw like an office romance. Except remember, she had her own band called Hole, and he had Nirvana. But their office romance basically spread around going to Europe and Seattle and playing in all these bands. Basically, finally, one day she confronted Kurt, and in her usual sort of calm and understated fashion said, you better dump all these bitches and be with me. And he did. Courtney, however, was really bright. She used to work in the costume division of Paramount Pictures. And she actually worked on movies like Mommy Dearest and American Gigolo, and she knew a lot about clothes. And what she did was she got a hold of all these crepe nighties and slips, threw them in the wash and cut them dry and started all these baby doll dresses. Actually, at their wedding, she wore a baby doll dress. Actually, Kurt wears pajamas. Okay. New York Times, in their usual foresight, the same way they spit on Bonnie and Clyde, spit on grunge and said it would never last. Okay. I was there for 5 years, so I can say these things. Okay. But if you wanted to be cool, grunge was it. The thing about grunge is that it has never left. And if you think it ever has, basically my niece goes to Skidmore, go up and walk around the campus, takes 5 minutes, it's right there. Zeffirelli's Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet's really not a great play. It's one of Shakespeare's earliest. But how do you resist a play that's about passionate love, idealistic love, that wishes the world was a better place? And it's all about kids. Except, whenever anybody would produce Romeo and Juliet, nobody ever hired kids. The film version starred Norma Shearer when she was 34, and Leslie Howard when he was 43. Sarah Bernhardt played Juliet into her 70s when she had a wooden leg. Isn't that nice? So dreamy. So dreamy. Here comes Zeffirelli. What does he do? He casts Olivia Hussey, who was age 15, Leonard Whiting, 17, ridiculously brilliant, ridiculously beautiful. But also his timing was brilliant. Because what he did was, once again, we're back in 1968. In 1966, Time magazine declared that the man of the year, this is before we did the person thing, was the generation under 25. In 1968, I was at Stony Brook. We shut the university down with protests. Columbia shut down in protest. Berkeley shut down in protest. I was stupid enough to go, or wise enough to go to the Democratic Convention in 1968 and got tear gassed and blown with riots. We left town and went to Iowa. That was fun. Okay. But this was the same time where the head of the Congress of the Congress of CORE, the head of the Congress of Racial Equality, said, "Don't trust anyone over 30." And what Zeffirelli did was made a movie that confirmed that. He took the Capulets and the Montagues, who were always basically kind of dreary, okay, and turned them into gangs, not unlike the movie that it was based, the movie that's based on, which is West Side Story, okay. And so he had these youths fighting for turf. He made Romeo the hot-headed rep, and he's the youth fighting for the perfect world is his way. But everything he does on impulse, from fighting Tybalt, from fighting Tybalt and killing him after Mercutio is slaughtered. Juliet, however, Juliet is the spirit. Juliet is the woman you lose the young girl you lose your heart to, because she believed that all people could be better. And so consequently, the whole movie revolves around her optimism. Also, Danilo Donati gave her the most incredible wardrobe. Remember, this is '68. These are clothes that Laura Nyro, Judy Collins, and Buffy St. Marie would have given their eye teeth for to perform around this time. In fact, I think had they been smart, because it was the next year, if the people because we think that they didn't think that enterprising back then. If Woodstock had opened up a boutique, excuse me, if Romeo and Juliet had opened up a boutique at Woodstock, they would have sold out in a half an hour. But the whole idea of this movie was that love, even though they died, was that the idea, the spirit of youth, the idea of love would conquer all. Or as Shakespeare would say, we are all fortune's fools if we forget to put our faith in love. What we wear in paradise. In 1992, Gianni Versace was on his way to Cuba. And his plane got delayed. And he was stuck in Miami. So he told his driver, drive around and find me some place that isn't boring. And he took him to the News Cafe, which at that time was the epicenter of Ocean Drive. I was given a phone call by a friend of mine who basically used to book Bruce Webb. This is around the time when modeling was exploding in Miami. And Miami was wall-to-wall glorious-looking people. My friend Richard did all the booking for Bruce. Bruce did all the models for Gianni. He called me up and says, you know this Versace guy? I need help. I got to show him around Miami. I don't know what the hell to do. And this began, I was saying, a lifelong friendship, except his life was cut too short. But by the time I got to the News Cafe, Gianni had already canceled his trip to Cuba. And he went, Halino, there's beauty everywhere. He says, take me everywhere. This is magnifico. He flipped out. Gianni fell in love with Miami. He bought Casa Crest Arena for $2 million and invested $35 in it. Okay, but he wanted to do a collection that would celebrate his love of this city. And what he did was, in 1992, this collection, we actually, last year, I think there was an exhibition that Valerie had, this great exhibition of the influence of gay people in fashion, which is almost redundant. But and I think 4 of the outfits, the Versace outfits, are mine, because Gianni used to make clothes for me, and they're wonderful. They were actually, I don't know if you know this, they're all willed to you, by the way. Yes, they are. All of my Versace clothes are willed to you. Okay, we'll talk about it later. And I'm not going anywhere right now. Okay. But it was this explosion, this ridiculous, fabulous, overwrought, oversexed collection of color that just, remember, this is right after the time when AIDS had just scourged us and scared us. We were terrified to talk about sex. And Gianni said, no, you have to live, you have to celebrate, you have to understand beauty. I mean, this was his gift to us. And this is right around the time of supermodels, which he helped create, of Christy and Linda, Cindy and Naomi. Naomi, of course, his favorite. And this whole thing was done tongue-in-cheek, but the pictures and were just so glorious. And these shirts were $1,500 to wear, and you couldn't keep them in the store fast enough. And I remember, it's a marvelous day, I remember showing up to Gianni with the shirt, and I had it on, it was tucked in, and at that time we all roller skated in Miami. And Gianni looked at me and goes, darling, you're wearing the shirt all wrong. And I said, it's perfect, it's what? He said, no, I show you. And he goes and he says, pulls out a little Versace bathing suit. He says, put this on, darling. Then he says, take your shirt, open it up. He says, now I give you another shirt. And he takes that shirt and he wraps it around. He goes, now put on your skates. I said, okay. He says, now you have your shirt open, you have your around the waist, now go out in the street and fly like a bird. And that was the beauty. That was his gift. His love of beauty, of both of clothes, of people, his excitement every day. I miss him every day. Don't you wish you lived in a Ralph Lauren ad? Everything's perfect and sunscreen. Nobody has a blemish. Amber light hits you just perfectly. The kids' clothes are unstained by peanut butter and Nutella. You know, Ralph created this perfect world for him and for every child of the Depression. It was an imagined heritage that everyone who had ever not come across on the Mayflower could imagine them attaining. Basically, it was this attainable Gatsby. It was the Jewish crest. And people bought into it so quickly because first of all, Americans really do have an inferiority complex to the British. We do. That's why we love the royals so much. Okay, we love the royals more than they do. Okay, but it was also about having this sense of polish, this sense of at least appearing that everything was all right. And sure enough, Ralph's world soon expanded very quickly into tabletop and furniture and dog beds and ski wear, everything but ironing boards. But he wanted to present, I remember when I was at the men's salad of the New York Times, one of the edicts was that you couldn't, you would take clothes from everybody and do a photo shoot, and Johnny's shirt, and we'd do his pair of Xenia pants, or Donna's jacket, and Calvin. Well, you couldn't do this with Ralph. He insisted head to toe, or he wouldn't count it as a credit. Well, eventually he got wise. Why am I at the disposal of editors when I could just take over and do this myself? So with the help of Bruce Weber, they created these visual dreams called advertorials. We now see them a lot, but we didn't, this was new. All of a sudden, in the fall of 1981, you opened up a magazine and there were 22 pages of nothing but Ralph. And what Ralph basically did was tell everyone in the masthead to go screw yourself. Because I'm gonna hijack your magazine and present the world as I see it. I don't need you. I'm just gonna pay for your real estate. Calvin actually did the same thing with a completely different look, much more sex, oddly enough using the exact same photographer, Bruce Weber, which also shows you the scope of his talent. But what Ralph did was that's how Ralph established this absolutely perfect world, which continues up to this day. I live right next to the Rhinelander Mansion, and you can't believe it. Half the time, half the people who walk out there look like they were mannequins breathed into life. Okay? And that's because what Ralph said was that people like to dream with us. They want to be part of our world, and they still do. From the sublime to the ridiculous. Okay. When I was a kid, you got dressed to go to the theater. You got dressed to get on a plane. You got dressed to go out to a restaurant. Now I get on a plane and the guy next to me is wearing a pair of flip-flops and decides he's going to look at his feet and pick and club them. Or there's a tracksuit over here. Or we go to the theater and this one's wearing sweatshirts and this one's wearing shorts. And I blame all of this on Jennifer Beals. Well, actually, Adrian Lin, who directed Flashdance, and Michael Kaplan, the brilliant costume designer, who just so happened to also do the costumes for both Star Wars, a little film called Star Wars, and Blade Runner, which to me may be the most visually brilliant movie of my generation. Okay, movie critics dismissed this movie. It was just a bunch of music videos. They got it all wrong. This is a time capsule of everything brilliant in 1983. It's based on a true story of a woman named Gina Sex Machina, who was a steel worker who danced in Buffalo. Okay, but what this movie celebrates is so many different things. It's about this early movement in the 80s with androgyny. Remember, it was the rise of Japanese designers, of Yamamoto and Rei Kawakubo, who truly were not sexy designers, okay? And then remember, she has this androgynous name of Alex. The boy's name is Nick. Same thing. She's stronger, she lives alone, she has a killer dog, she's independent, she's coy, she's foul-mouthed. Remember, she throws a rock through the window, which thinks he's being jealous. She's horny, she's a guy. She really is. But she struck a chord. There's a reason why there were 3 million copies of that song, Maniac. That's over. And it wasn't because everybody wanted to be nuts. No, they wanted to dance like her. And where could they dance? Here's where it all ties in. In 1983, along with the movie Flashdance, was also the rise of a little video by Jane Fonda called the Aerobics Workout. Everybody was doing workouts. Aerobics was it. I did it 3 times a week. Then there was also a video by Olivia Newton-John called Physical, the gayest video ever made. Okay, but remember, in the little white leotard with the purple and the chartreuse and the blue, the conflagration of these 3 things is not, what it did was it took leisure wear, all of this leisure wear, and made it possible to wear it and look cool in the street. And if you think it still doesn't last, go stand outside a Soul Cycle these days. And go walk through Greenwich, Connecticut. It's all, I was just there this weekend, it's all there. It's all there. But there's a bonus. I'm going to go back. There's a bonus to why that sweatshirt is also remembered. Okay, and by the way, in the book, I don't know if you can see it there. You see that on the right? There's a 6-step guide to teaching you how to cut the sweatshirt. Okay, and it's foolproof. I did it. Okay? Why is that so memorable? The funny thing is she's actually wearing a leather skirt, though you can't see it. But what people don't remember is that while she was talking to, when she took the boyfriend home, it's the first time, and he was actually shyer than she was. Like I said, the roles were reversed. While she was talking to him, she actually was undoing and taking off a lace bra and pulled it out from underneath the sweatshirt, which not only got, basically, so not only to give the idea of women a place to look, but it also had every guy in the audience just wishing that he could say, what a feeling. Everybody wants to be Sasha Fierce, okay? This weekend's video, not so much, but I just missed it, the point. But the idea, this was actually the first video to create a dance phrase. And just like I said, when we both do the singing in the rain thing, how many people here have never done, you all did. Obama did. Everybody did. Once again, the idea, the fierceness and the fun of taking a simple, very simple dance number and bringing this dance, which is a seemingly easy dance number to do, except if you don't have her hips and you don't have her legs and you don't have her stature and you don't have her voice, it's kind of tough. But what it was done for was, but it brought out, it's a very clever thing in terms of the love, because there was all this speculation about Jay-Z and her, whether they were married, whether they're not married, and she gave it away only in one moment. She wore that glove that Lorraine Schwartz had made from her by titanium. In the very last shot, I don't know if you can see it on her second finger, is an 18-karat diamond. That was the only thing she ever said. That's it, we're married, I'm done, I don't have to talk about it anymore. Lucy is ancien. For those who don't know what the word ancien means, it's an antiquated French word that means pregnant, except it usually refers to being pregnant out of wedlock. However, why did they not use the word pregnant? Because today, it's no big deal. We follow every step of the Princess of Cambridge's from trimester to trimester. And we resent the fact that we weren't allowed in the delivery room. Okay? But in 1952, you couldn't say the word pregnant on TV. So when Lucy started feeling, she invented this word, dauncy. Okay? All of a sudden, she was with child, bun in the oven, happy event. She actually was pregnant during the first year of I Love Lucy, but they hid her behind things. You know, couches, the pocketbook. In fact, if you remember, okay, everybody knows what a Kelly bag is, right? Why is a Kelly bag called a Kelly bag? Because when Hermes brought the bag out and Grace started wearing the bag to cover her stomach when she was pregnant with Prince Albert. Because women didn't appear in public when they were pregnant. Very much. They were out, but they didn't do major public appearances. Well, here comes television's first queen of comedy, and she's going, I am going to be damned, number one, if I'm giving up my show, and number two, if you're going to hide me behind anything. You know something? I'm pregnant. I'm delighted. I want to have this kid. Suck it. And Lucy wanted to be Lucy. The amazing thing was not only did she want to be exposed, Lucy is not a comedian, she's a clown. And all of the, remember, what do we know her from? Stomping on the Grapes and the Chocolate Factory. Lucy curtailed nothing in her pregnancy on this show. She was still that bad, ridiculous girl. Also, we don't look at these things and think it's a big deal. 1952, interracial marriage on TV. Why did nobody make a big deal about it? Because they owned the TV studio. Also major. At one point, Desilu produced 17 different shows on television. This is major. Lucy basically, what she did was, and her husband thought she was hot. Lucy just reversed the entire post-war understanding of what it was like for a woman to be pregnant in this country. That you shouldn't have to hide, that you don't look terrible until you give birth, that you may not be a raving beauty, but you are beautiful because you're pregnant. The reason why you rave over Cate Blanchett on the red carpet wearing Dries Van Noten is because of what she did first. Lucy created the maternity industry, basically, which is now like a $5 billion industry. When Lucy gave birth on TV, it was very funny. The thing was taped earlier. Lucy actually had a C-section, because she really was pregnant. She had a C-section on the exact same day to coincide on January 19th, so she could actually give birth in real life as the same day that she gave birth on TV. 44 million people watched. This is a brilliant stroke of publicity. Now, here's the one curious thing I want to add. That both the network and the sponsor were the ones who refused to let the word pregnant be on TV. Who was the sponsor of Lucy's show? It was the American Tobacco Company, whose tagline for the show was, "We make the most wonderful cigarette in America. Your throat can tell." The mind reels, don't it? Let me find that. I switched. This is a love story that everybody just wanted a happy ending. The look on their faces, the bliss, the rhapsody, it's like everybody else. They're on the red carpet. It's the first time Michelle Williams and Heath, they were both nominated for Brokeback Mountain. They're both stay-at-homes. Remember, they lived in Brooklyn. They shopped at Whole Foods. They were the anti-Hollywood couple. And I remember being on the red carpet that night, and Vera created this dress, and Vera called me, and she says, "Wait till you see, you're going to love it or you're going to hate it." I said, what color is it? She says, "It's called Bahamian yellow." I said, "What the hell's that?" Everybody else called it mustard mountain. It's Bahamian yellow, trust me. And then Michelle showed up. Here's the amazing thing. Neither one of them, he's not what you'd call handsome. She's not a classically beautiful woman. But, I mean, here's the weird thing. It was almost like it was like set up in the stars. That year, Sandra Bullock wore navy blue. Jennifer Lopez wore dull dark green. Uma Thurman wore nude. Reese Witherspoon wore that antique ivory dress when she wore that didn't fit her. Okay? Needed a fitting, really. Amy Adams wore brown. Charlize Theron wore charcoal green. And then, like the sun through the clouds, here she came. And you just looked at them, and it was like everybody else had vanished, and it was just about the two of them. And just the one little note, it was that little bright red lip. Kate Young was the stylist. It really is a stroke of genius. Almost as beautiful, maybe even more beautiful in terms of the dress, look at this, is the back of the dress. It's composed of 7 different colors that all form that one. And like I said, it didn't end happily. They left, he died. But as Vera said, I wish we all lived in the movies, the happy ever after ones. But on this night, they were my love story. And we will end with Sex and the City. Sarah Jessica Parker could run for mayor and win at a walk. Giuliani fought crime. Bloomberg brought in business and bike lanes. De Blasio, I honestly have no idea what he's done. Sorry. But Sex and the City remember, I'm a native New Yorker. And for my whole life, I heard, look, and I have to admit it, in the 70s, it was not safe here. My car got broken into every other week. You put the sign in saying, no Benzie box, it didn't matter. okay? Your bicycle got stolen every 27 seconds, okay? And all I would ever hear was, when I got to college, is how can you live in that city that's fearful, that's trounced, that's dumb, it's fast, it's too rude, it's too dark, it's too cold, it's too driven, it's no fun. And she turned this place, with Sex in the City, into this wish-fulfilling, obsessively spontaneous Oz for adults, where basically every dream could be fulfilled. Life was sparkling and colorful, but more important, she didn't do it for kids. She did it for a generation of women who were almost forgotten by fashion in the magazine industry and Hollywood and the beauty industry. What Sarah Jessica Parker told women in their 30s and 40s was that you could have a career, you could have fashion, you could have style, you could have sex, you can have friends who will stick with you, you're in through thick and thin, you can have sex. And better, you didn't have to get married to do it. No one had ever seen a quartet of women, not just on TV, anywhere like these four women. These were urban astronauts with flight suits by Bergdorf, okay? And everything they touched, from Manolo to Magnolia Bakery to baguettes, just everything turned to gold. The irony is Sarah Jessica had 25 boyfriends on the show. But her real love wasn't Mr. Big, and it wasn't Aiden either. It was New York. And the proof of it was, I don't know how many of you were here, and if you've ever seen it, but the show gets rerun and you should watch it. It's the 9/11 episode. The season started right after September 11th. Look, we were beat to shit. We were a mess. We were all scared. We were terrified. We were angry. We were helpless. And the show starts with everybody in a bad place. And all the women except for Miranda, who's now living in Brooklyn, which was her problem, are alone. Carrie goes to the movies by herself. Charlotte, of course, is horrified that any woman can do that. Samantha breaks the gloom and decides, guess what? It's Fleet Week. You all know what Fleet Week is. We all got to go see the sailors, okay? What could be more horny, okay? Carrie goes and says she's taking a pass. She goes up to the Guggenheim, but it starts to rain, and she can't get a cab. And she's rescued, oddly enough, by a sailor, by Lewis. By Lewis, who was, by the way, if you don't know, it's an actor named Dan Sujata. Great-looking guy. And he asks her where she's doing later, and he says he's going to be at the party at Fleet Week. So Sarah goes, okay, basically Carrie goes, okay, well, maybe I'll show up. Okay, Samantha and Charlotte go, they go crazy, they both expose their tops. Samantha's not, Carrie goes, she doesn't see Lewis, and she's just about to go, and there's Lewis. And Lewis couldn't be more charming. His voice is like Tupelo honey. And he dances with her, and he says, wow, I came all the way from Louisiana to dance with this city girl. And he charms her, and takes her in his arms, and they dance. She's thrilled. And she thanks him, because she says, I got to thank you, because this week, New York City kicked my ass. And then Lewis says to her, well, I don't know how you put up with it. I don't know why anybody would live here. How could you ever stay here? You should come with me. And Carrie gets up and goes, it's not so bad. And she gets up and she kisses him in the forehead. And he goes, where are you going? And she says, I have to leave. And the final voiceover is, if Lewis was right, and you only get one love, then maybe New York City may just be mine. And I can't have nobody talking shit about my boyfriend. That night, every New Yorker who watched this show cried like a baby. I hope you like my book.